Good afternoon. Welcome to Rourke Art Gallery Museum. It's a pleasure to see you all here. I want to begin by thanking the various supporters of our museum that allow us to do what it is we do. Our members, donors, our staff, volunteers, and then the entities that provide us grant support. The Minnesota State Arts Board, the FMRA Foundation, and the Arts Partnership. It's a lot of fun to welcome back Chris Mortenson for another exhibit. For those of you who don't know Chris or his work, I'll talk about his work a little bit first. What I've observed in his photography is sort of I don't know if it's a cause and effect, a relationship, or just the natural back and forth of two things that we think of as separate entities, human beings and their environment. In the case of Tumulus, his previous exhibit, it was how we shape our environment. And in this exhibit, I feel like it may be a bit of the opposite. How our environment shapes us. Now, as for Chris himself, I got to know Chris a little bit before he had anything to do with work. When I started doing some adjuncting at Concordia College, I think that was about the same time that you started there. And I immediately appreciated Chris's humor and his candor. He has opinions. No. He holds them strongly and is always ready to hold them forth. So I'm excited for him to talk about this new series of work. I see that some of his subjects are here as well. So I'm just ready to let her rip and offer this microphone to Chris Mortenson.
I think, first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming. I also want to say thank you definitely to the Rourke, to Jonathan, to Cameron, to Courtney, to Katie, for having this show in the space and for setting it up so well. I sort of dropped the work off in a fog of finishing it. I was like, you go ahead and put it up. Mostly because I have certain ways that I would hang it, but I want to be open to other ideas. And I think that that's important, and I think they did a really good job. So why don't we give them a round of applause? The other thing I want to stress before I start talking about the work is that oftentimes I think a common misconception is that art is made in a vacuum, that it's one person sitting in a studio making things. And at least the way that I make work, it could not be further from the truth. So, this work is here because of a grant that I got from the Minnesota State Arts Board. It is also in this space thanks to a grant from the Longspur Fund, and so I want to highlight both of those. But also, there's an entire community of people behind this work, from people like my really good friend Jonathan Ratner, who I constantly send images to, and we talk about back and forth about things, to people like Julia Walk and Tess Varner, who hear me talk about this work, and sometimes read things that I write about the work. But also, a lot of the portraiture that you're seeing here today comes from the help of a few people. So Mike Bush is one who hooked me up with somebody that, with Ashley over here, that got, I was able to get a photograph of Mercedes here because of that. Former student Tim Wilbur back there, got a lot of people together in Ely for me. And so there are lots and lots of people behind it. Charlie Hovde is another person who got some people with it. So, there is a huge part that's not just me that's here. And so I just want to say thank you for that. The other thing is, like, we're living in a strange time, I think. And, you know, institutions like the Rourke are under attack. Art itself is under attack in many instances, and so there's a really cool, like, lucite box on the counter over there. If you can find your way to put some money in it, that would be really, really wonderful and help support the work. So, I'll talk about the work now. The work itself, you know, I think Jonathan hit it kind of perfectly. The work that I make is oftentimes, or all the time, about landscape, and most of the time I'm working through my own questions or trying to understand my own feelings about the landscape, conflicts that I have within the land. And so with the last work, Tumulus, I was working in the Iron Range and, you know, with these like built mountains that they have there of overburden. And I started to photograph people, and it's the first time that I really brought people into my work. And I liked what was happening. And so as that work was winding down, and I was thinking about where I could move next, I kept thinking about hunting. So, you know, I grew up in South Dakota. I started hunting at a young age. And you know, I was really into being outside, and I wanted to be outside, and so I wanted to go to like the gun safety course as soon as I could. I wanted to get out, but I mostly had to go out with friends. And so I would go out with friends and you know, hunt when I could. But there was always something different about like my love of hunting versus theirs. A lot of times that was, you know, if we didn't get anything, they were upset. I was not, because I was outside. I don't think that they loved killing things, but like I really have conflict with that. And so I've had that throughout my whole life. And now when I go hunting, I mostly just go hunt for grouse, mostly with Dwight Nicholson. We're not very good at it. We just sort of walk, it's like hiking in the woods with guns. But like, I don't think that bothers either of us, because it's not necessarily about killing the thing. It's about the experience of being there. So as I was thinking of new work, I kept thinking like, that's something that I think I should explore. So all of this work is made with large format cameras. And I sort of knew that I would split them between sort of larger color photographs and smaller black and white photographs, because I also like to think about how you can sort of push a viewer around a gallery, how you can make somebody stand back from something and make them draw closer to something through the size of the image that they're looking at. And for a long time, from when I was in grad school until, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, I unfortunately got known as like a digital person, and somebody who was like really good at Photoshop manipulation, because I put a lot of like landscapes, different landscapes together and presented them as like one landscape that, you know, maybe existed in reality or didn't. I did that through a variety of means. And I just like I liked that work, but I wanted to move past that and kind of get back to like just making you know, more like traditional photographs. When I was in undergrad, I think in like the second or third photo class I took, we did a lot of alternative process work, and I like took to palladium printing immediately. Well, platinum and palladium printing, and then once I realized that you could leave the platinum out, and it made it a little bit cheaper, and I liked the way that it looked more, I sort of like fell into palladium printing. And so I knew that I began this work that I was going to make palladium prints, and those would be the portraits, because it's a slow process. It's a very determined process, and I wanted to photograph people in a way that you had to get close to them and sort of confront them. You'll notice that none of them are wearing hunting clothing of any type, and that was a specific choice as well, because I wanted that illusion to sort of fall away. You kind of have to read the statement to realize that this show is even about hunting. And so the idea of, you know, what happens when we're looking at a body of work and we don't maybe realize what the connection is between the two things. So does that matter? I don't know, yes and no. But what happens when you are looking at somebody, you realize that they're a hunter, and maybe they don't know or don't look the way you think, right? So people who maybe don't fit the bill of what a hunter is, through clothing or through who they are, what happens in those sort of instances. And then the landscapes, you know, I was thinking about like habitat, places that I've actually been hunting, and just like general things that you pay attention to when you're out and hunting. So a lot of it is like game reserves, hunter trails, places that I've actually been hunting, sometimes fishing like that one, but it's adjacent enough. And things that are also like look sort of quote unquote natural, but maybe like I just pulled the car over and took a photograph of something. And so where does that sit in this like idea of landscape? I think I'm interested. It should be noted that this is, while this show is like, I think cohesive at this point, it's the beginning of this work. So this is the first like large show that I've had of this so far. A few things have been shown like on campus, but this is the first big gathering of work, and this is something that I'm hoping to work on for the next, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, as long as I can keep finding people and keep getting out into the landscape to make photographs. So, you know, it's also like informative for me. Like I walk around the gallery and there's a couple that I'm already gonna cut, that I think they made the cut as I was like looking at them close, and I like them now, but seeing them in a larger group, I think maybe I need to either reshoot or move away from that. And I think that's a good way to be an artist, is like to continually like critique yourself, to continually move the work forward. You know, this is not a retrospective in any way, so it's kind of a living series right now, and we'll see where it goes. For those of you that are technically inclined or want to know process stuff, if you've never heard of palladium prints, it's a process from the 1870s, and it just uses palladium as the metal instead of silver. And so you mix up chemicals, and you mix up a solution of 3 different chemicals. One of those gives you extra contrast. You can figure out, you know, if you need more or less contrast, and then you spread it onto paper, let it dry, expose the negative to a light source. I'm using actually like an exposure unit rather than using the sun, which you can do. But since I made most of this work in the winter, sun is not as available when I'm available. So I was using an exposure unit to make it, which also makes it repeatable, and I can sort of figure those things out, which is a nice way to work. And then, yeah, I think that's it for that. So I really love palladium prints just because of that process. I like mixing the chemicals, I like spreading it onto paper and letting it dry. It's the things that sort of like made me interested in photography in the first place when I took my first photo class, and that sort of like alchemy of putting a piece of paper into, you know, a clear liquid and having an image come up. That's a process that like I still teach to students, and it like excites me just as much now as it did when I was in school, seeing it for the very first time. Yeah, so that's a little bit about, you know, my thoughts about the show, how things are made. Yeah, I think I'm good with that. Anybody have any questions?
So you said most of these were shot in the winter. What draws you to shooting winter landscapes in particular?
Well, most of them weren't shot in the winter, most of them were shot in the fall, but I was like producing the palladium prints in the winter.
Okay.
Some were shot like kind of on the edge of winter, but really it's time. I mean, since I'm a professor, it's hard to find time to go out, so I'm usually relegated to breaks, or sometimes if I can get away for a weekend, I have like flurries of activity sometimes over the summer. But this last summer was a lot of figuring out who I was going to photograph, where I would photograph them, and then I was able to take trips to meet those people and photograph them, and also do some landscape work while I was out doing those things on breaks.
When you're walking around, specifically with like the landscape photos that you take, are you looking for something and then you feel like this is it, I want to shoot it, or is it more of an exploration?
Like sometimes it's, I know exactly what I want, right? Like I knew I wanted a close-up of a birch, that one over there. And so it just was like walking down a trail. And then it's figuring out, like standing there and talking to myself, like, is this what I want? Is this not what I want? Some things are holdovers from that last project I did of like, so this one in particular, you know, the tumulus was all about, like, it's very hard to move in the Iron Range outside of the main roads, because there are physical barriers that keep you from going down roads because the mines own them. And so I took a lot of photographs of barriers, and so when I got there, it was just sort of like a, you know, back in my head, like Manchurian candidate thing, like I have to take a photograph of a barrier. So while that was new, it was like instantly I was like, oh, I'm just sort of continuing the same thing. And some things are just, drive for 5 or 6 hours and go down roads and get out, walk down a trail and see if there's anything and realize there's not, and just keep driving until you find things. So a lot of it's exploration. When I take these trips, if I have people that I'm gonna photograph, I'll set up times with them, and then the rest of the time it's just nonstop, like driving around. So, you know, if I'm gone for a week to do something, I'm putting on 3,000 or 4,000 miles, like just in the state of Minnesota, and sometimes going back and forth over roads. When I did the Iron Range work, like, I mean, I would challenge that if you don't live there, I've probably driven there more than you. Because it's just like so much back and forth. Like I know those places so well, that it kind of becomes second nature. So like this one in Tamarack, I've passed it for years, and I've always been drawn to this place, like this specific spot. And then I was just coming back from this like first group that I did in the fall, and it just happened that the light was right, and so I stopped. Also been going past the give a hoot sign and never gave it, or other than being like, that's kind of cool. And so I just like was like, what the heck, you know, I'll pull over and take a shot of it. But sometimes things just present themselves, like the one in Bemidji, you know, I knew that state game area was there, the refuge is there, and I was just driving and I took a wrong turn and ended up down the street and was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And so I just like pulled off up a curb and parked, and then like ran across to the roundabout, and then went and grabbed the camera, and everybody was like, there's a couple people yelling. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just like either going past places repeatedly or figuring out ideas of what I want, but not needing anything really specific other than just like an idea of things. So to me, the color stuff is the stuff that I'll like really keep exploring. I mean, the portraits, I think I want to keep doing, and we'll find more people to shoot, but the color stuff is, you know, there's many, many avenues I think it can go down. And so this feels to me like the tip of the iceberg for that stuff.
So is the kind of a two-part question. Is the majority of this work in the central Minnesota, like Iron Range-ish area? And are there other places you want to explore and document as well?
Yeah, there's only one that's actually from the Iron Range here. It's the one on the wall over there. The rest of it is all from either, well, up near Ely, or like sort of north central Minnesota, like Bemidji down through Tamarack National Wildlife Refuge, just northeast of DL, the Rice River National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah, I guess maybe I should say that, like, the way that I start projects, I mean, answering your question maybe a little better, is when this started, I was dedicated, like I knew it was what I wanted to do, and I wanted to have a hunter and then a landscape that was important to them. And so I talked to people, and this landscape actually happens to be Mike Bush's, who's over there, and right here. But, you know, funny things happen. So when I started this, like the black and white is with an 8x10 inch camera. I bought a brand new 8x10 inch camera, and it came with light leaks. And so I bought it from a place in England. And so I was like, hey, this has light leaks. And they were like, how do you know? And I sent them a picture of a film that I had developed. And then they were like, do you know where it's leaking? And so I went into the darkroom and I put like 4 really bright headlamps inside the camera. And then I took pictures, and they were like, no, you need lights from outside coming in To which I said,
What's the difference?
it comes in, it goes out. Light works and and they're like, no, it needs to come in. So that we argued about that for a while, and then they sent me these felt strips, and it didn't work, and I had to actually send it back to them and get it back. And in the meantime, I went out and I was shooting stuff, and I went out and I shot color things, and I came back and I realized that I had been shooting with film that was like about 6 or 7 years expired, and I didn't compensate for it, so they were all really thin. And so the first time I showed a few things, I like didn't have this pairing. And so, and it was just for the faculty show, not just for the faculty show, faculty members. It was for the faculty show, and I was like, well, I'm forced to only do 3, but I have 5 portraits. And so I put them up, and I was still like, I'm gonna do this, and I saw them on the wall, and I was like, I don't need to have one. I mean, it's just like a side. So I think it continually, I allow things to continually evolve, and I try to let the work dictate how I make it in a lot of ways. To answer the other side of that is like, are there more places? Yeah, I would love to go all over. Right now I'm keeping it confined to the state because I'm here, because I'm a Minnesota hunter. I think there's enough resource to do it in Minnesota at this point, but you know, I haven't shot any landscape work. I grew up in Sioux Falls, so in any of like southwestern Minnesota or southeastern Minnesota where the landscape's quite different. I mean, maybe kind of similar to the one over there, but yeah, I'd like to, over the next few years, just kind of get everywhere.
I like the sepia in the portraits. Can you talk a little bit about art choice?
Yeah, it's actually not, it's not really a choice, it's what you get with palladium. So palladium just gives you a warmer tone, and you can actually accentuate it a little more than I have in these. I didn't feel quite yet like ready to test with that, but if you warm it, when you develop it, you can actually, like if you warm the developer, you can push the warmness even more. And there was a couple that I think just through the fluctuations in the darkroom at school happened to be a little bit warmer, and they came out like quite warm. But yeah, so the difference, the reason why I said earlier is that like when I was an undergrad and I did platinum palladium, you can do just straight platinum prints too. Those come out really cool black, more like silver gelatin prints that you would normally see. And then the palladium adds some warmness. So by taking out the platinum, the palladium just makes it kind of warm.
Can you talk a little bit about the experience of photographing people who are kind of looking back at you maybe in a different way than the landscapes do?
Yeah, I mean, for how many years that I've been like making photographs, I was like, I'm not interested in people. I don't want to do it. I mean, like, I feel like I'm a personable person, and I just like talk nonstop a lot. And people talk to me constantly, like stores. I mean, I constantly get into conversations, and I don't really understand why you're telling me this. But for whatever reason, I'm somebody that people like to talk to, who don't know me. And, but it's daunting to like find people. Like when I was making Iron Range work, it was like, wow, God, there's no good places to go, so where do I go? Like, do I stand outside Target and be like, yeah, I know you just bought me bedding, but like, you want to come with me for a while? Which kind of you have to do sometimes. I think with this stuff, you know, the people that I knew, it was easy, right? Like it was easy to like sort of just go and talk with them. Although like Dwight, I think I photographed Dwight 3 times. He doesn't like being photographed. And I was just like, it's okay, you're gonna do this. And the first time we did it, it had been like really cold. And then it was like, we had a few days in the 40s, it was in January, and I was like, we'll do it tomorrow, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be 40. And it was like 20 degrees and windy, and so he's like standing outside in a coat. And so we did that real quick. Also the same thing, the first time I photographed Mike when I had the light leaks. And, you know, so sometimes like talking to people that you don't know kind of feels awkward. The way that I approach it is I just set up the camera and then we just talk for a while. We just talk about things and I try to get them to be a little bit more relaxed. By telling them like, you don't need to smile. Like I actively don't want people to smile because it's a fiction usually in photographs, performance, and I don't want people to perform for it. You'll notice that there's some difference in the amount of the person that's showing, and sometimes if they're turned or not. And so that's just me kind of like playing around too, being like, I think this is an interesting pose. Like Cooper was just standing like that looking at something, because when we went to make that photograph, there was a noise and he just turned, and I was like, just don't move. And then sometimes, like the guy in the corner over here, Denny Berg, it was all I could do to be like, no, you can't move. Like, I know that you're there, but like, stop, can you stop walking away? Because now we actually have to make this photograph and I have to focus it every time you move. So it's always a different experience, but I really love talking to people, and so those like moments, I've been invited for coffee many times by people being like, well, you want to come in and have a cup of coffee? With this one and the tunas. And so it's strange that I was against it for so long. And really with that work, the first couple photographs I took of people, and I looked at them and I was like, I guess this is what I do now. This is part of my photographic process now. And if you had talked to like 20-year-old Chris, I'd be like, there's not a chance in hell that's gonna happen. Because I'm mostly just interested in like landscape and what landscape does and how we talk about it, and the sort of disconnects between how we talk about it and how it exists. And to me, the people like sort of make that jump, the thing that I was always like trying to reach to, and I was just too thick to get it until I did that work.
Can you comment on the lack of wildlife in a series about hunting?
Yeah, I don't know that it's that interesting. Like, I think wildlife photography is its own separate thing. If there happens to be an animal, that's fine, but it's not about like teal or a deer or something like that. Like, I'd be much more excited by photographing like roadkill, or photograph somebody like skinning something, and than I am about like making like photographs of the animals themselves. Because again, like hunting is an avenue to think about landscape rather than landscape being an avenue to talk about hunting. So like, I'm not interested in like talking about if hunting is good or bad, or what hunting is on like a macro level. Hunting is a way for me to think about landscape, to reconcile my own thoughts about landscape, my own thoughts about hunting. And so I just don't know that animals are that interesting at this moment. Now, this could be a moment, much like people, where maybe I'll photograph, I don't know, an elk or something, and be like, that has to be. But like, to me, going hunting isn't about the animal. It's about the connection with being outside. It's about looking like intently and experiencing intently. And so for that, to me, the animal has never really mattered. It could be that, the next time there's a show here with this work, that maybe it's like a bunch of animals.
Roadkill series.
It could be a roadkill series too. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions. One question is, how many photographs do you take? Like, what's the ratio between the ones that we see and the ones that you're actually taking? And the second one is, when you're selecting from the ones that you've taken, what criteria guide you? Like, there a punctum or some kind of dynamic or some, what, do you have any kind of thing you're looking for that makes a difference?
Yeah, I think that with the amount, the ratio is much closer than if I'm working digitally, because it is such I'm very determined when I'm making those images, and I'm very dedicated to being like, this is good, or this is not. And so I'm not really like a fast photographer, and I'm just like shoot when I'm working this way. And so sometimes I'll get out, many times I'll get out. I might take a photograph with my camera or with a digital camera on my phone, look at it and be like, that's not very good. And sometimes, more often than I'd like to admit, I'll be like, this is gonna be amazing. And I'll make a photograph of it, and then I'll get the negative and be like, that's not that interesting at all. And so I would say maybe you're seeing, like here you're probably seeing like, for the color stuff, maybe like a sixth of what I shot, which I feel like is a pretty high ratio typically, but it is because I'm very like focused in what I'm doing. With the portraits, you know, I take like, this is a bad reason to do something, but it's a reason that unfortunately we have to think about. I picked like this crazy expensive thing to do. So palladium printing is really expensive. 8x10" film is stupid expensive. And so it's much higher. Like I knew that I'm photographing people, but I'll go and I'll take at least four photographs of each person so that I can do a couple different poses and have like backup in case I screw up the exposure for some reason. So those it's much closer. There's maybe, I don't know if there's anybody that got cut out of this that I've shot so far, although there might be soon. And, but the color stuff, yeah, like I'll go out and I'll shoot, not a ton, but quite a bit of film. And then, yeah, in this one, maybe it's maybe a sixth. In Tumulus, it was maybe like I don't know, maybe like a 20th or 25th of what I did. So it's still a lot of stuff. Because then I'll take at least 2 photographs of each scene to account for exposure or trying to do different things, trying to get more depth of field, things like that.
How about the criterion for what
Oh, yeah.
guides you, whom to or a relationship or a dynamic thing? Like what makes it interesting to you? What are you looking for?
I look a lot for texture. I look a lot for compositions sometimes, but usually when I'm going to photograph something, it's either like, it's kind of a gut feeling. So I come up and I'll be like, that looks good. I'll get out, yep, nope. You know, like sometimes I'll stand up and just like get in my car or I'll be walking something and I'll be like, ooh, that looks like, I don't need to go get the camera for that. So it's a lot of like, I make the decisions quick. I don't know exactly why, other than maybe practice of, you know, having taken photographs for so long. And I think that there are many photographs that I want to make that I just don't, that I think are good, but it doesn't feel like the right time. So I don't do a lot of like, there's some late day stuff, but I don't do a lot of like really rich, super colorful things like what you would see, you know, big HDR images like on Instagram or things like that, because I like things to look more closely to the way that I'm viewing them. And I think that those images are beautiful, but the odds of visiting there or being there at a time when that happens, not to photograph, but just like to visit, or if you're hunting and doing things like that and moving through a landscape, they're usually not gonna coincide. So I actually was sort of drawn to this like kind of more deadpan look of things being sort of frontal, muted a little bit. So I typically mute things down a little bit so it looks a little more realistic. And yeah, I'm kind of going for a certain look in things, but I'm really drawn by texture and then just maybe I like some strange compositions sometimes. So sometimes you might see things that don't make sense to you, but they make sense to me.
So you have a room full of stories here. Which of these stories surprised you the most?
You mean with people or with the landscapes?
Either.
Well, the landscapes, it might be the Straight River. Mostly because I've been there quite a few times, to that exact location quite a few times. And it was, when I pulled up, I knew I was gonna go there to photograph it. And when I pulled up, it was like completely, it was so beautiful out. And it was like really nice sun. And within 2 minutes, these like dark clouds moved in and all of the color went away, which is why it's printed kind of like that. As far as like the people, man, that's tough. I mean, Denny Bird was an interesting moment. Very, very nice person, but like was also doing yard work while I was trying to corral to do things. Scott Stowell was another one that I think was just like one of those moments where you don't expect to connect with somebody in that way. So he's up in Ely, he's an author, he works at Ely Outfitters with Tim, and he like drives people to go canoeing in the Boundary Waters. And he wanted to talk about what the project was before he agreed to it. And so I was in Minneapolis. I actually had just photographed Mercedes, and I called him, and it was while I was walking my dog around in Minneapolis, and we ended up talking for like almost an hour, just about very, very sort of similar ideas about hunting and what the project could be. And then, in Ely, talking to him, it was just like we had to like remember that we were there to make photographs at like a later time of day, because we were just like hanging out and chatting. Tim was there as well, and so it was just like a really nice. We've emailed quite a few times back and forth. So.
In the process of making the show, was there anything new you learned about yourself?
That's a good question. I don't know, it's interesting because I kind of go through like hating myself while I'm working on things. Like I make all the frames too, and I get constricted to specific times because the only place I have to do it is the studio at school. And so, I try not to work when students are there, so I'm not in the way. And also, like, I don't want to be in the way of Dwight's studio. And every single time, I like curse myself for doing it. But I think, I talked about this the other night when we were at dinner, but it's like a moment of, I already am like misremembering like the physical and sort of like time crunch goal of getting all the frames done, relegated to like a break where I should be taking a break, but I'm at school more and like working much longer hours than I am normally. It's already like, I walked in here today and I was like, I can make another 27 of these without much problem. But in the time, so it's just like, art is like, even photographs can be like incredibly physical to like make and do. And it's like sometimes just wonder like why, like with framing, it's like, why don't I just get grant money to try to like get frames made? But I do like the process. I do like the slowness of things. I think the big thing is like that I just really enjoy slow, sort of methodical work on things. So like the process of the Palladium prints is I develop in this like crazy, like really awful for you developer called Pyro, but it yields really beautiful results. It's really dangerous, but it takes a long time. So each negative is like 40 minutes of developing, and you can take each of these by 4, and that's how many hours like I was developing. But that doesn't bother me. I like those sort of slow things, and so I like very focused, detailed work, which I think is why I'm also drawn to printmaking. But it just reveals, every time I make a show, it reveals that, like, to me, the biggest thing about art is the community around it. Talking to people, talking to other artists, showing people work, reaching out to people who have no reason in the world to help you, but they do help you, and they help you find people. And to me, that just is, like, really the best part about making art.
So you touched on it briefly in a couple of comments, in that some things maybe won't continue on into the next show or the next kind of stage of the process. Do you are there some really specific things that you could touch on that you're like, yep, now that I have got everything up, this is where I want to go with this, or it's a little more nebulous still?
I think it's not nebulous for the pieces that I probably will cut.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes that, you know, I tell students this a lot too, it's like, we're off of work right here. And you need to just like, I mean, I'm sure I said that when you took 2D from me. You just need to like take a step back and make sure, because everything can look really amazing here. And you stand away a little bit and it's like, oh, that's all the same tone. Like it all looks the same. And that, I think that can happen far away from work as well. So with individual pieces that might not make the cut, there are some that like, honestly, when I put them together, like there's one specifically that I was on the fence with and I was kind of back and forth. It's one of the landscapes. And I thought, you know what, like I keep getting drawn to it, which means something. And even when I showed up to unload the work, I brought it in and I was like, and then I saw it on the wall and I was like, that was real smart to bring it, Chris. And so, you know, that sort of stuff can happen too. I think the like concept as a whole is getting focused down a little bit more. I like this direction, especially from the original direction. But, you know, since I'll probably be doing this for 3, 4, 5 more years, it's gonna shift again to something. I might be more pointed with the thing, you know, the images. I mean, landscape's a difficult thing because if you take you know, I was just telling all my students about this. If all you do is take photographs that are really far, especially around here, like I say, like if you go to West Fargo and you just take a bunch of like 28, you know, really wide angle images, it's just gonna look like you're drawing a line, right? Like that's all you're gonna be doing. And so you have to get close to things. And that's where things like the thing on the other side of this wall, the trail marker, you know, those sort of things come from, where they're like a little bit more chaotic, but I think I might push that a little bit more. And maybe animals. Who knows? I mean, I might as well, if I see something, I might as well give it a shot. Part of the issue is like a lot of times you see them far away, right? And the lens that I have on this just doesn't, I can't get close. So unless they sit like a blind and wait for things to come up. But you never know what will happen. So, yeah.
When did you start becoming interested in photography? Was it really young? Were you always taking pictures, or was it a certain point in your life where like this one?
The earliest thing that I can remember is I used to go with my parents to a place in the Black Hills. It was like a retreat for the church that we went to, called Lee Valley. And it was like a little valley. And a bunch of us were standing by all the buildings, by like the main house one day. And there was a little animal that popped out of the forest on the other side of this pasture. And it was a black-footed ferret, which is endangered. I don't know if it was endangered then, probably. And I remember hearing, at least my memory is this, who knows if that's true, but my memory is that my mom was like, if you want a good picture, give it to Chris, because he'll get a good picture. And then one of the other family members that was there handed me like a crappy point-and-shoot camera, and I like army crawled halfway across. I highly doubt it was a good photograph, but that's the first thing that sticks into my head. I think for most of my life, I was super interested in being an archaeologist. Like I was really, you know, even though I didn't know that what I was really interested in was paleontology. And then in high school, I got into like, I was like, maybe I'll go into wildlife management. And at some point in high school, I started messing around with cameras again. And that sort of stuck from there. So, I don't know, high school is just like where I decided like, I'm gonna go to school for art, for photo, and then I've just been on that trajectory ever since. Even though I like other things as well. Alright. Oh, yes, sorry.
I guess it's kind of a follow-up question to the first go I had. When you're taking photos and you're planning, you know, I'm going to go do color photography of landscapes, I'm going to try and get more portraits, how much kind of weight do you put into, I want to make a balanced collection or like assemblage of work, or is it just, I'm interested in this, I know I can do that, I want to just get as much and then kind of sort out afterwards?
Yeah, kind of sorted out.
Okay.
I think that I'm not necessarily concerned with it being like even and having one over the other. I think it's going to generally turn that way. Excuse me. I think it'll generally sort of like go that way because I have interest in both of those things. But I don't really like putting constraints on things. The thing that I don't want to happen is I don't want the portraits to feel like they weren't given enough, which is very weird to say, but that they weren't given enough space in the series. So maybe it might tip to more portraits than anything else, because I also think that the landscape can live on its own in a way that the portraits can as well. But I think the landscape, the point is driven quicker with landscape.
So, I'm not a hunter, so I don't fully understand all the imperatives and pursuits. But what I do not understand by some folks I know who do is you have this sense that you're like retreating from civilization, going to seek out an almost primeval experience. But what I see in some of these pieces are like evidence of civilization front and center. Whether it's a telephone pole, that funny little like snowmobile stop sign, or the give a boot piece that you mentioned before. So, would you mind talking about those choices?
Yeah, I mean, I think with hunting, it's a nice thought that you're going to do something primal and like receding, but like, I don't know, there are people that do get into the backcountry and like, go out and go into the backcountry and they drive there in their big trucks and they take their, high-powered rifles with scopes, so there's like this sense of like, I'm getting out and away from things. And this is part of the conflict I have with landscape and the way that we talk about it. But it's a nice thought, but like, are we actually doing that? Like, to what point are we separating ourselves? So, I don't necessarily like to think about myself as separate because I'm part of the world. Like, I'm part of civilization. I'm also part of like an animal world. And so to me, I used to make photographs when I was an undergrad with no people. Like, I would go to extreme lengths to get no like residual like human artifact in the work. And there was always something missing for me. It was like human touch. Because like the thing that interests me about landscape is the way that we alter it and how we think we're separate from it. And so to me with these, like humanity has to be part of it. And if you think about like where I grew up, people going pheasant hunting. They're all walking through cornfields. Some of them have been plowed, maybe not plowed under, but some of them have, gotten the corn from it and stuff. They're going to places that are very, very, very contemporary. There are places where you can go where there is like wilderness or wildness and you can completely get away. But I'm just not myself, I'm not interested in like that need of a state. I think about it more as like a very localized, sometimes when I think about these, there's a place when I lived in Iowa City that I used to go, there's a nature park that was right across the street from my house. And there was a place where I could stand, and I would often go in there with my dog, where you couldn't hear anybody. There was like a gravel trail behind you. And if you didn't look that way, it felt like you could be standing in the 1700s. And that shift, that like very like localized, small shift, I think is what interests me in images. So having things that are parking lots or roundabouts, I think to me is really important to the work. Farms that now present much more natural than they did then because it's all prairie grass now. That's like protected for the next 10 years as a prairie. So if somebody goes there in 5 years, it's not gonna look like a farm at all, it's gonna look more wild than it is now. And those are the things that I am really interested in with landscape. Cool, thank you all.
All right, please help yourselves. We have more coffee. We have the last of the Girl Scout cookies that we've been putting out for about the last quarter. Thanks again to Cameron Peterson and John Weaver for those. And this coming weekend is going to be your last chance to look at Dennis Kroll's exhibit in the East Gallery. Painting with Fire is on caustics and photo on caustics. Last weekend, if you haven't been upstairs, we just opened exhibits of prints from Cameron Peterson and Annette Dubourg. And later this month, Courtney Donahue is going to be opening her new exhibit in the East Gallery, Untethered, and we'll be welcoming back florist Steph Leininger for her, it's become an annual event for us, Gallery in Bloom, and that'll be upstairs. Thanks all for your attention, and enjoy, and come back and enjoy again.